I want to bring in Democratic strategist Nayyera. She is a former Obama White House senior director and former State Department spokesperson, and also with us, CNN political commentator and USA Today columnist Scott Jennings. He was a special assistant to President George W. Bush. Nayyera, let's start with Speaker Pelosi's comments on Joe Biden as part of that clip we showed with Christiane. Last May, she said she wouldn't endorse a candidate in the primary. If that wasn't an endorsement, what was it?
I think it was a reality check. Listen, everybody was surprised that Biden came in as low as he did. And certainly we forget that Elizabeth Warren came ahead of Biden, which in of itself should have been news. But it's a reflection of where the Democratic Party is and recognizing that Iowa and New Hampshire are not reflective of America writ large, but in particular the Democratic Party. Nevada has only been moved up in the calendar of primaries and caucuses of 2008. It's 30% Latino, 10% African American. It is far more appealing, I think, to and representative of what Democrats and America writ large looks like now. And Joe Biden has done very well with African-American voters and with voters of color. That is what he is relying on. He's relying on a firewall in South Carolina as well. So after that, I think we get a better sense of where he stands and whether or not Democrats are looking to have a change election and really change policy and the structure of the system, or if they're looking to be very pragmatic and focus on electability and who can beat Donald Trump.
And Scott, as Jeremy just reported, President Trump and part of his motorcade may take a lap at the Daytona 500 this weekend, as well as the possibility of doing Air Force One flyovers. He's also headlining this huge, expensive fundraiser, the most expensive of his presidency, at a billionaire's home tonight. With so much attention on the Democratic field, is this just him trying to take some of that spotlight back?
Yeah, look, this is Trump the showman. He understands news cycles, he understands how to counter-program, and he understands that, there's ways for him to get attention. I mean, I think this idea to take a lap at the Daytona 500 is pretty freaking epic. I mean, how many people sitting out there are like, man, if I were president, what would I do? Well, I'd probably put that on my list. And so Trump's going to, I imagine, get a huge ovation if he actually pulls off this stunt, because it's a cool idea. And, by the way, that is this is what incumbent presidents can do. I mean, you mentioned the fundraiser. They're putting money in the bank. They have, these huge rallies. They're doing this big political organization. He's using the power of the presidency to get attention. This is the advantage that incumbent presidents have. Obama did it in 2012. Bush Cheney did it in 2004. That's what makes incumbents hard to beat.
Sure, but the Democrats now have a chance to make their votes count another time in this new election, and we have those pictures we showed, Nayyera, from the Nevada caucus, and the early voting underway, showing the long line, at least at this one precinct in Las Vegas. The wait time was at 1.3 hours. They didn't have enough volunteers to process all the votes quickly, so that's why you have that gridlock. What's your reaction to seeing that?
Well, Nevada typically doesn't have huge voter turnout in primary or caucus elections, and separate from the fact that caucuses are an outdated form and really an undemocratic form of getting votes collated, it does show that there is an enthusiasm out there that folks already, for a official caucus that's not until February 22nd, are already waiting in line. You have votes, at least 15 million ballots already out in the early, the March 3rd Super Tuesday state. So Democrats are turning out. They're very excited. They're interested. The question's going to be, again, how are they looking at this election? The 60% of Democrats who believe the candidate needs to be able to beat Donald Trump, does that translate to a Bloomberg or a Biden or a Mayor Pete, like that more centrist foil to Donald Trump? Or is it going to end up being somebody on the more progressive side who's promising big structural change, like a Bernie or Elizabeth Warren?
And Scott, with Nevada Democrats clearly passionate about turnout today, we also saw record turnout in the New Hampshire primary. Should that enthusiasm make Republicans nervous?
Well, Donald Trump got quite a few votes in New Hampshire and Iowa as well. And I think we're going to see massive turnout on both sides. I think the last election we had 60% turnout. We're probably looking at 65+% turnout. So millions of people who didn't participate last time will. That's a good thing. Regarding this caucus system, I tend to agree that the caucuses, look, I don't like anything that makes it structurally difficult for people who want to participate. So if you're somebody who doesn't have a lot of time and you're having to go wait in a long line, it might dissuade you from participating. And so I come from Kentucky, where we have a closed primary system, and that's the system to me that works best. It allows party members to vote quickly and to choose their party's nominee without too much hassle. So I tend to lean against caucuses and more towards closed primaries, and think that works best.
The president's been going hard at one candidate who's not on the ballot in Nevada, Michael Bloomberg. And while a lot of Democrats have criticized the president for his rhetoric, Bloomberg is dishing it back. He's calling the president a carnival barking clown on Twitter. Nayyera, is that a smart move for Bloomberg to win over voters, or is that a mistake?
Well, he's certainly trying to play the same online game that President Trump has been doing on Twitter, not just in the campaign, but also as president of the United States. Bloomberg has invested $320 million already in this campaign and $6 million a day. Heavy digital. He's trying to take the fight to Donald Trump. And otherwise, Democrats are lagging behind in the digital space. So that's going to be a key arena for getting a message out. And Bloomberg's only one poll away from being on that Nevada stage. Now, he's not yet necessarily offered an alternative vision of what he thinks America should look like. He's on the defense for his own record in New York, but it seems that, and President Trump had said, even just a couple of days ago, that Bloomberg and Sanders are the two people that he's looking out for.
Yeah, speaking of Sanders, we've seen President Trump seemingly defend Bernie Sanders and implying the Democratic establishment is trying to stop his momentum. Scott, why is Trump doing that? Is Bernie Sanders the candidate that the president wants to take on in November?
Yeah, I think that he offers such a stark change, a stark movement to the left, you know, this whole socialism idea that he doesn't really shy away from. But I imagine the Trump people think that that would scare off a lot of the voters that the Democrats need to win back in order to take back the White House. I also think that there are a lot of people out, I mean, I think in Trump and in Sanders, you have similar kinds of voters, right? People who are sort of anti-establishment voters. They don't like the idea of the big structural institutions, you know, coming down and taking things away from them, which is how a lot of the Trump folks feel about some institutions. I'm sure it's how some of the Bernie people feel. So I wonder if they don't have a kinship over that. But the bottom line is, if Bernie Sanders is the nominee, you're talking about somebody who's going to run under a socialist banner against a president presiding over the best economy we've had in at least half a century, low unemployment, higher wages, more jobs than people who are looking for jobs. And I really do think the Trump people think that is exactly the kind of contrast that would help a president with lower approval ratings get reelected.
Well, here's the
final thought.
Yeah, here's the counterpoint to that argument. Sanders has a loyal following that'll turn out. He is himself a boomer who actually is able to draw in millennial voters. There will be more millennial and zillennial voters in this election than the boomers. So he closes that generation gap. He brings out the enthusiasm, and he offers an alternative vision, which is that the economy, by the numbers, may look like it's working for people, but it doesn't feel like that to a majority of Americans who are struggling under either student loans or not being fully employed, right? You can have a job as potentially a Lyft driver delivering food when you have a college degree or you're a public school teacher and not making enough to make ends meet. So that's the economic vision that Bernie Sanders offers, and frankly, let's be honest, at this point, President Trump will call any Democrat, even Mayor Pete Buttigieg, he'll call him a socialist because it sounds scary enough. You need somebody who's strong enough in emotion and strong enough in their policy to be able to cut through that rhetoric.
Both of you, thank you so much for being here. Nayyera Hawk and Scott Jennings, I appreciate it.
Thanks, Anna.